The gunshot echoed through the dusty Wyoming Territory town of Pine Creek as Daisy Lockhart flinched, the sound a stark reminder of how quickly her life had unraveled. It was 1876, and her brother's gambling debt had just sealed her fate. She stood on the porch of the local saloon, her cotton dress whipping around her ankles in the autumn wind, watching helplessly as her brother Thomas stumbled backward from the blow that had sent him sprawling into the dirt. "Your sister or your life, Lockhart," growled Vernon Blackwell, the richest and most feared man in the county. His silver-streaked mustache twitched as he tucked his pistol back into its holster. Decided yet, Daisy's heart hammered against her ribs. At 22, she had dreams beyond this frontier town, dreams that were dissolving like morning mist as Thomas, bloodied and desperate, looked up at her with pleading eyes. "I'll marry her off to you tomorrow," Thomas stammered, blood trickling from his split lip. "Just give me till then." "The debt will be paid." The words struck Daisy like physical blows, her own brother trading her like cattle to save his worthless hide. Blackwell's cruel smile revealed tobacco-stained teeth. "Sunrise at the church, or I'll have both your heads." He turned, spurs jingling as he stalked away, leaving Thomas crumpled in the dirt and Daisy frozen in disbelief. What neither of them noticed was the tall figure leaning against the hitching post across the street, watching the entire exchange with keen interest. Beneath the shadow of his worn Stetson, Hunter Ingram's jaw tightened. He'd come to Pine Creek tracking rustlers, not looking to get involved in local dramas. But something about the proud set of Daisy Lockhart's shoulders, even as her world crumbled, stirred something in him he thought long buried. As the sun dipped behind the distant mountains, Daisy paced the small cabin she shared with Thomas on the outskirts of town. The single room felt suffocating as she gathered her few belongings into a weathered carpet bag, not that she'd need much as Blackwell's wife. The thought made her stomach twist. "There has to be another way," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "You owe him $500, Thomas. Surely there's someone else we can borrow from." Thomas sat at their rickety table, nursing a bottle of whiskey, his face already purpling from Blackwell's blow. "There's no one, Daisy. I've asked everywhere." His voice cracked. "It's just one marriage. You'd be set for life. Blackwell owns half the county." "And I'd rather die than be his wife," she spat, slamming her hairbrush onto the table. "He's a monster. Everyone knows what happened to his last two wives." A knock at the door startled them both. Thomas lurched to his feet, hand instinctively moving to the empty holster at his hip. Blackwell had taken his gun as partial payment. "Who's there?" he called, voice betraying his fear. "Name's Hunter Ingram. I'm here about your debt." Daisy and Thomas exchanged worried glances before Thomas cautiously opened the door. The man who filled the doorframe was tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in trail-worn clothes. A gun belt settled comfortably at his hips. His face, partially shadowed by his hat, was weathered by sun and wind, but his eyes were clear and piercing when they met Daisy's. "May I come in?" he asked, his voice deep and surprisingly gentle for a man his size. Thomas stepped back, bewildered. "You work for Blackwell." Hunter shook his head as he entered, removing his hat to reveal sun-streaked brown hair. "No, I witnessed what happened in town, thought I might offer a solution." Daisy stood straighter, clutching her shawl around her shoulders. "What kind of solution?" Hunter's eyes assessed her briefly before returning to Thomas. "I understand you owe Blackwell $500. Thomas laughed bitterly. $512 to be exact, might as well be $5,000 for all I can pay it." Hunter reached into his vest and pulled out a leather pouch that clinked heavily as he set it on the table. $550, more than enough to cover your debt with some left over." The siblings stared at the pouch, then at Hunter with identical expressions of disbelief. "Why would you do this?" Daisy asked, suspicion narrowing her eyes. "What do you want in return?" Hunter's expression remained impassive. "A fair question, Miss Lockhart. I want nothing from your brother." He paused, meeting her gaze directly. "But from you I want a promise." Daisy felt the blood drain from her face. Was she simply trading one captor for another? "What kind of promise?" "Promise to give me a chance. 1 year of marriage, during which I'll provide for you and treat you with respect. If after that year you wish to leave, I'll arrange for a divorce and provide you with enough money to start fresh wherever you choose." Thomas stepped forward. "You want to marry my sister? You don't even know her." "I know she deserves better than being bartered to a man like Blackwell," Hunter replied evenly. "I've been looking to settle down, establish a homestead. I have land about 2 days' ride from here, good land with water rights. I need a partner, not a possession." Daisy's mind raced. The stranger before her was offering an escape, but was it merely from one trap into another? Yet there was something in his steady gaze that didn't match the predatory gleam she'd seen in Blackwell's eyes. "How do I know you'll keep your word?" she asked. "I'll put it in writing." "Have the agreement witnessed by the judge." Hunter placed his hat back on his head. "I'll give you till morning to decide. If you agree, we'll pay Blackwell, get married by the justice of the peace, and be on our way before he can cause trouble." After Hunter left, Daisy and Thomas argued long into the night. Thomas, relieved at the prospect of escaping Blackwell's wrath, urged her to accept. Daisy remained skeptical, but as dawn approached, she realized Hunter Ingram's offer was her only viable choice. Morning arrived with a pale golden light filtering through the cabin's single window. Daisy had barely slept, but she'd made her decision. She wore her best dress, a simple blue cotton with white trim that her mother had helped her sew before consumption had taken her 3 years prior. Her blonde hair was neatly braided and pinned, giving her at least the appearance of composure she did not feel. Hunter arrived as promised, looking more kempt than the previous evening, though still distinctly a man more comfortable on the range than in town. He'd brought a wagon with supplies already loaded. "Have you decided?" he asked without preamble. Daisy nodded, lifting her chin. "I accept your offer, Mr. Ingram, but I want everything in writing as you promised, already taken care of." He handed her a folded document. "Judge Harmon witnessed it this morning. 1 year, and you're free to go if that's your choice, with $300 to start anew." Daisy read the agreement carefully, surprised by its thoroughness and fairness. "And what if I choose to stay after the year?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. Something flickered in Hunter's eyes, surprise, perhaps, or hope. "Then we renegotiate terms as equals." They found Blackwell at the saloon, already deep in his cups despite the early hour. His bloodshot eyes narrowed dangerously when Hunter laid the money on the table. "Who the hell are you?" Blackwell snarled. "The man paying Thomas Lockhart's debt in full," Hunter replied calmly. $512, as I understand it." Blackwell's hand twitched near his holster. "The deal wasn't for money, it was for the girl." "The deal was for the debt to be paid," Hunter countered. "I'm paying it, unless you'd prefer we take this matter to the sheriff." Several tense moments passed as Blackwell weighed his options, his gaze shifting between Hunter, Daisy, and the money on the table. Finally, he snatched up the cash, counting it meticulously. "This settles things with Lockhart," he growled. "But I don't forget faces, stranger. Especially those who interfere in my business." Hunter's expression remained neutral. "Noted. Good day, Mr. Blackwell." Outside, Daisy released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "He won't let this go easily." "Which is why we need to be married and on the trail within the hour," Hunter replied, guiding her toward the Justice of the Peace's office with a gentle hand at her elbow. The ceremony was brief and businesslike. Judge Harmon, a balding man with kind eyes, performed the necessary rites. Daisy spoke her vows in a clear voice that belied her inner turmoil. Hunter's responses were equally steady. When the judge pronounced them husband and wife, Hunter hesitated only briefly before placing a chaste kiss on her forehead. Thomas embraced his sister tearfully. "I'm sorry, Daisy." "For everything. Take care of yourself, Thomas," she whispered back. "And for heaven's sake, stay away from the gambling tables." As Hunter helped Daisy into the wagon, she caught a glimpse of Blackwell watching from across the street, his expression thunderous. A shiver ran down her spine. "He's planning something," she murmured. Hunter followed her gaze and nodded almost imperceptibly. "Which is why we'll take the northern trail instead of the main road. It's longer but less traveled." They left Pine Creek behind, the wagon loaded with supplies and Daisy's meager possessions. Hunter rode alongside on a magnificent chestnut gelding, scanning the horizon regularly. The mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still snow-capped despite the late spring warmth. They traveled in silence for several hours, the rhythmic creaking of the wagon wheels and the horses' steady breathing the only sounds. Daisy's mind whirled with questions about the man she'd just married, but pride kept her from asking them. It was Hunter who finally broke the silence as they stopped to water the horses at a small creek. "I reckon you have questions, Mrs. Ingram." The name startled her. Mrs. Ingram, she was someone's wife, now a stranger's wife. "Several," she admitted, accepting the canteen he offered. Beginning with why a man would pay such a sum to marry a woman he's never met. Hunter leaned against a tree, studying her thoughtfully. "I've been looking to settle for some time. I have good land, as I said, but a ranch needs more than one pair of hands to thrive. A partnership seemed logical. There are easier ways to find a wife than rescuing women from debt collectors," Daisy pointed out. A hint of a smile touched his lips. "Perhaps, but not many women would understand the life I'm offering. It's not easy country we're heading into." "And you think I would?" "I saw how you stood up to Blackwell. There was fear in your eyes, sure, but there was fire too." Hunter straightened, returning to his horse. "We should keep moving. I'd like to make it to Miller's Creek by nightfall." They continued their journey, the landscape gradually changing as they left the prairie behind and entered more rugged terrain. Daisy found herself studying Hunter when he wasn't looking the confident way he sat his horse, the alertness in his posture, the occasional gentleness when he spoke to the animals. He was a man comfortable with himself and his surroundings, which only made her more curious about his past. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, they reached Miller's Creek, a small trading post consisting of a general store, a stable, and a few rough cabins. The proprietor, a burly man with a wild beard, greeted Hunter like an old friend. "Ingram, didn't expect to see you back so soon." His eyes widened as he noticed Daisy, and with company no less, Hunter nodded. "Frank, this is my wife, Daisy. We were married this morning." Frank's surprise was evident, but he recovered quickly, offering Daisy a respectful nod. "Mrs. Ingram, welcome. We don't get many ladies out this way." "Thank you, Mr. Miller," Daisy replied, finding some comfort in the man's genuine warmth. They secured a small cabin for the night, and Frank's wife, a plump, cheerful woman named Martha, brought them a hot meal of stew and fresh bread. Daisy ate gratefully, realizing she hadn't had anything since breakfast. When they were alone in the cabin, an awkward silence fell. There was only one narrow bed, a small table with 2 chairs, and a pot-bellied stove for warmth. Hunter cleared his throat. "I'll sleep on the floor." "You take the bed." Relief washed over Daisy. "Thank you." He busied himself laying out his bedroll while Daisy prepared for sleep behind a makeshift screen. When she emerged in her nightgown and robe, Hunter was already settled on the floor, his back to her. "Mr. Ingram." She ventured, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Hunter," he corrected. "Seems right, considering." "Hunter," she amended. "Why did you really do this? The truth this time?" There was a long pause before he answered. "I meant what I said about needing a partner, but there's more." He shifted to face her, his expression serious in the lantern light. "My father was a man like Blackwell. He ruined lives for sport, including my mother's. I swore I'd never be like him, and that I'd stop men like him when I could." Daisy absorbed this, seeing him in a new light. "That's admirable. But still a significant risk for a stranger. Sometimes doing the right thing requires risk." He turned away again. "Get some sleep, Daisy. We have another long day tomorrow." Daisy lay awake long after Hunter's breathing had deepened into sleep, trying to reconcile the complexity of the man she'd married with the simplicity of their arrangement. 1 year. She could survive 1 year with this enigmatic cowboy, and then she'd be free to choose her own path with enough money to make a genuine start. It wasn't the life she'd envisioned, but it was far better than the fate that had awaited her with Blackwell. Morning came too quickly, rousing them with the sounds of the trading post coming to life. They breakfasted with Frank and Martha, restocked their supplies, and were back on the trail as the sun cleared the eastern hills. The day's journey took them deeper into the foothills, the trail becoming steeper and more challenging. Daisy found herself impressed by Hunter's knowledge of the terrain. He pointed out landmarks, identified plants and their uses, and shared stories about the region's history. Gradually, the stiffness in their conversation began to ease. "Have you lived in Wyoming Territory long?" Daisy asked as they stopped for a midday rest. Hunter nodded, helping her down from the wagon. About 6 years. Came west from Missouri after the war. You fought in the war between the states. The conflict had ended 11 years earlier, making Hunter older than she'd initially estimated, perhaps around 30. Union cavalry, he confirmed. Wasn't much left for me back home afterward. The West seemed like a place to start fresh. He handed her a plate of cold biscuits and jerky. What about you? Always lived in Pine Creek, Daisy shook her head. We came from Illinois when I was 16. Our parents thought the frontier offered better opportunities. A shadow crossed her face. They didn't live long enough to see if they were right. Hunter's expression softened with understanding. I'm sorry, losing family is never easy. Thomas is all I have left, she said quietly. Despite his faults, he cares for you, Hunter observed. Though his methods leave something to be desired. A reluctant smile tugged at Daisy's lips. That's a charitable way of putting it. As they continued their journey, the conversation flowed more naturally. Hunter explained that his ranch, the Double Arrow, encompassed nearly 1,000 acres of good grazing land with reliable water sources. He'd built the main house and barn himself, added fencing where needed, and had a small herd of cattle started. It's not fancy, he admitted, but it's solid. I've been adding to it each year. Sounds like you've accomplished a lot on your own, Daisy remarked, impressed despite herself. I hire hands during calving and branding seasons. The rest of the time, it's manageable solo. He glanced at her. Though having a partner will make a difference. The word partner rather than wife wasn't lost on Daisy. It suggested equality rather than possession, and she found herself warming to the concept, if not yet to the man himself. As the sun began to set, they crested a ridge and Hunter reined in his horse. There it is, home. Daisy leaned forward on the wagon seat, taking in the vista spread before them. A valley stretched into the distance, cradled by mountains on 3 sides. A creek wound through it like a silver ribbon, and nestled near its banks stood a substantial log house with a wide porch, a large barn, and several outbuildings. Smoke curled from the chimney, indicating someone was present. It's beautiful, she breathed, genuinely impressed by the picturesque setting. Pride was evident in Hunter's voice. Best piece of land in the territory, according to those who know. The creek never runs dry, even in drought years. They descended into the valley as dusk deepened. As they approached the house, a figure emerged onto the porch, an older man with iron gray hair and a weathered face. That's Elijah, Hunter explained. He helps out around the place, keeps an eye on things when I'm away, been with me since I started the ranch. Elijah waved as they drew closer, his expression curious as he noted Daisy's presence. Hunter helped her down from the wagon, then made the introductions. Elijah, this is my wife, Daisy. Daisy, this is Elijah Cooper, the best ranch hand and worst cook in Wyoming Territory. Elijah's eyebrows shot up, but he recovered quickly, tipping his hat. Mrs. Ingram, well, ain't this a surprise? Boss rides out to catch rustlers and comes back with a bride. Life takes unexpected turns, Mr. Cooper, Daisy replied with more composure than she felt. Call me Elijah, madam. Everyone does. He turned to Hunter. Got the stew on and fresh bread baked this morning. Figured you'd be hungry after the trail. You figured right, Hunter said gratefully. Let's get the horses seen to, then we'll eat. While Hunter and Elijah tended to the animals, Daisy entered what was now her home. The main room was larger than she expected, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall, a wooden table with chairs in the center, and simple but sturdy furniture arranged for comfort rather than show. Windows on 3 sides allowed for ample light and air. A doorway led to what appeared to be a kitchen, and a staircase indicated rooms above. Everything was surprisingly clean and orderly for a bachelor's dwelling, though distinctly masculine in its sparseness. There were no decorative touches, no softening elements that might make it feel more like a home rather than just a house. Daisy found herself mentally rearranging things, imagining curtains at the windows and perhaps a quilt on the couch. Hunter entered, stamping the dust from his boots. It's not much compared to what you might be used to. It's far nicer than our cabin in Pine Creek, Daisy interrupted honestly. You've built something impressive here. Surprise and pleasure flickered across his face. Thank you, I'll show you upstairs. There are 2 bedrooms, you can have whichever you prefer. The upper floor consisted of a landing and 2 bedrooms separated by a small sitting area. One room was clearly Hunter's, with a large bed, a chest of drawers, and personal items neatly arranged. The other was smaller but had a comfortable-looking bed, a washstand, and a window overlooking the creek. This will be perfect, Daisy said, setting her carpet bag on the bed. The washroom is downstairs off the kitchen, Hunter explained. I installed a proper bathtub last year, figured it was worth the expense. Daisy's spirits lifted at the mention of a real bath. That sounds wonderful after 2 days of travel. I'll have Elijah heat water for you after supper. Hunter lingered in the doorway. I know this isn't what you expected for your life, Daisy, but I meant what I said about making this a partnership. Your input on the running of the house and ranch will be valued. The sincerity in his voice touched something in her. Thank you. I'll do my best to contribute. Supper was a surprisingly pleasant affair. Elijah's stew was hearty if simple, and the bread was indeed excellent. The men talked of ranch business, fences that needed repair, a mare about to foal, the condition of the cattle they'd moved to the north pasture. Daisy listened, gradually forming a picture of the operation and its needs. After the meal, true to Hunter's word, a bath was prepared for her. The men retreated to the porch with coffee, giving her privacy. Sinking into the hot water, Daisy felt the tension of the past days begin to ease. The situation remained surreal, married to a stranger, living on a remote ranch, her future uncertain beyond the promised year. Yet there was also a strange sense of possibility in it all. Later, dressed in her nightgown and robe, she ventured downstairs for a glass of water. Hunter was alone by the fire, Elijah having returned to his cabin near the barn. Everything all right? He asked, looking up from the book he was reading. Yes, thank you. The bath was exactly what I needed. She poured herself water from the pitcher on the sideboard. What are you reading? He held up the volume, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. Just came out this year. Frank at the Trading Post knows I like to read, keeps books aside for me. Daisy couldn't hide her surprise. I wouldn't have taken you for a reader. A hint of amusement crossed his face. Because I'm a cowboy. I suppose so, she admitted. It seems I've misjudged you in several ways. We've only just met, he pointed out reasonably. There's time enough to form accurate judgments. He closed the book. Speaking of time, we should both get some rest. Ranch days start early. Upstairs, Daisy settled into her new bed, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the house and the distant calls of night creatures. Her last thought before sleep claimed her was that perhaps this unexpected turn in her life might not be the disaster she had feared. The following weeks brought a steady rhythm to Daisy's new life. She rose with the sun, prepared breakfast for the 3 of them, then turned her attention to learning the workings of the ranch house. Hunter had been right, it was solid and well built, but it needed a woman's touch to truly become a home. Martha from the Trading Post visited a week after Daisy's arrival, bringing fabric for curtains, seeds for a kitchen garden, and the friendship of another woman, something Daisy hadn't realized how desperately she needed until it was offered. Hunter's a good man, Martha confided as they worked on the curtains together. Keeps to himself mostly, but always fair in his dealings. Folks around here respect him. He's been very kind, Daisy acknowledged, but I still know so little about him. Martha smiled knowingly. He'll open up in his own time. Men like Hunter don't give their trust easily, but once given, it's absolute. The garden became Daisy's project, a small patch of earth near the kitchen door where she planted vegetables and herbs. Hunter built her a fence to keep out rabbits and deer, watching with quiet approval as she worked the soil. My mother always kept a garden, he remarked one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson. Said there was healing in growing things. Was she right? Daisy asked, sensing a rare opening into his past. Hunter was silent for a long moment. She died before I was old enough to ask. My father, he stopped, his jaw tightening. My father wasn't a kind man. When I was 8, he beat her so badly she never recovered. Claimed it was an accident that she fell down the stairs. Daisy's heart ached at the pain evident in his voice. I'm so sorry, Hunter. It was a long time ago, he said, his tone suggesting the subject was closed. But later that night, he left a book on her bedside table, a volume of poetry his mother had loved. It was the first truly personal gift he'd given her, and Daisy recognized it for the gesture of trust it represented. As spring deepened into summer, Daisy found herself increasingly involved in the workings of the ranch. She learned to ride better, accompanying Hunter and Elijah on shorter trips around the property. She took over the bookkeeping, discovering a talent for numbers that Hunter readily acknowledged was superior to his own. "You've got a head for business," he commented, reviewing her neat columns of figures. "Better than most men I know." "My father was a banker," she explained. "He taught me and Thomas both, though Thomas never had the patience for it." Hunter's expression darkened slightly at the mention of her brother. "Have you heard from him?" Daisy shook her head. "No, but I didn't really expect to. Thomas has always followed the path of least resistance." "You deserved better from him," Hunter said quietly. Their eyes met across the table, and something shifted between them, a moment of understanding that went beyond their practical arrangement. Daisy was the first to look away, unsettled by the warmth that had blossomed in her chest. That night, unable to sleep, she heard Hunter leave the house and followed him at a distance. He walked to a small rise overlooking the property, where he stood in silence, his figure silhouetted against the star-filled sky. There was something so solitary, so resolute about his stance that Daisy found herself wondering if he was as content with their arrangement as he appeared to be. Did he regret his impulsive rescue of her? Did he ever long for a real marriage, one based on love rather than convenience? The questions lingered in her mind as she slipped back to the house, leaving him to his private thoughts. July brought scorching heat and the arduous work of haying. Additional hands were hired for the season, and Daisy found herself cooking for a crew of 6 hungry men. Hunter worked alongside them, his shirt soaked with sweat as he pitched hay onto the wagons. Daisy brought water to the field several times a day, aware of Hunter's eyes following her movements, his expression unreadable. One evening, after the hired hands had returned to the bunkhouse, Hunter found Daisy at the creek, cooling her feet in the water after a long day in the hot kitchen. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, already removing his boots. "It's your creek," she replied with a smile. "Our creek," he corrected, sitting beside her and submerging his feet with a sigh of relief. "You've been working too hard. We should hire someone to help with the cooking when we have a full crew." "I don't mind the work," Daisy said truthfully. "It feels good to be useful." Hunter studied her profile in the fading light. "You're more than useful, Daisy. This place has changed since you came. It feels like a home now." The sincerity in his voice made her turn to him. "Thank you, that means a lot." Their faces were close, the moment suspended between them. Hunter's gaze dropped briefly to her lips, and for a heartbeat, Daisy thought he might kiss her. Instead, he reached out and tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "We should head back," he said softly. "Early start tomorrow." The almost moment lingered in Daisy's thoughts as she prepared for bed. Their marriage remained unconsummated, Hunter respecting the boundaries of their arrangement with unfailing courtesy. Yet increasingly, Daisy found herself wondering what it would be like if those boundaries were to shift. August brought a heat wave that tested everyone's endurance. The creek ran lower, the grass browned, and the cattle grew restless. Hunter spent long days in the saddle, moving the herd to better grazing grounds, often returning after dark, exhausted. One such evening, Daisy was waiting with a hot meal and the news that Blackwell had been seen at the trading post, asking questions about Hunter Ingram and his new wife. Hunter's expression hardened. "Frank sent word," Daisy nodded. "Martha brought it herself." She said Blackwell claimed to be an old friend looking to reconnect, but Frank didn't trust him. "Frank's a good judge of character." Hunter pushed his plate away, appetite gone. "I wondered if he'd track us down eventually." Fear, dormant for months, reawakened in Daisy's chest. "What do you think he wants?" "Nothing good." Hunter's hand closed over hers on the table. "But don't worry, he won't get near you, I promise." The protective fierceness in his voice sent a flutter through Daisy's heart. "I'm not the same frightened woman he threatened in Pine Creek," she said, finding her courage. This is our home, and I won't be driven from it by fear. Hunter's eyes warmed with something that might have been pride. No, you're definitely not the same woman. You've become quite the rancher's wife. Partner, she corrected with a small smile. His answering smile made her breath catch. Partner, he agreed. That night, Daisy found it hard to sleep, listening for any unusual sounds that might signal danger. Around midnight, a floorboard creaked in the hallway. She sat up, heart pounding, then relaxed as she recognized Hunter's familiar tread. He was patrolling the house, she realized, keeping watch while she slept. The next morning, Hunter rode to the trading post to gather more information. He returned with news that Blackwell had moved on toward Laramie, but had made it clear he'd be back. Frank thinks he's looking for investors for some scheme, Hunter reported as they walked the property line together, using his connection to me as a way to establish credibility. What connection? Daisy asked, puzzled. Hunter's expression was grim. Blackwell is claiming to be my father-in-law. Daisy stopped short. That's absurd. He has no relation to me whatsoever. He's spinning a tale that you're his daughter from his first marriage. Says I stole you away without his blessing. Hunter shook his head in disgust. It's a ploy to gain sympathy and potentially access to my property. But surely no one would believe him without proof. People believe what serves their interests. Hunter's voice was bitter. And Blackwell is very good at identifying what people want. The threat of Blackwell cast a shadow over the following days. Hunter insisted Daisy not ride out alone, and Elijah took to carrying his rifle when checking the furthest pastures. Yet life continued. Cattle needed tending, meals needed cooking, and the rhythm of ranch work provided a semblance of normalcy. One evening in late August, a summer storm rolled in from the mountains, bringing welcome rain but also violent lightning. Daisy stood on the porch, watching the spectacular display illuminate the valley when Hunter joined her. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he remarked, standing close enough that she could feel the warmth of him at her side. "Terrifying and beautiful both," she agreed. A particularly dramatic fork of lightning split the sky, followed immediately by a deafening crack of thunder. Daisy instinctively stepped closer to Hunter, and his arms slipped around her waist. Neither of them moved away as the storm continued its magnificent performance. "I've always loved storms," Hunter confessed, his voice low near her ear. "The raw power of them, the reminder of how small we are in the grand scheme of things." Daisy looked up at him, raindrops occasionally blowing onto the porch to mist her face. "You're a surprising man, Hunter Ingram." His eyes held hers, darkening with an emotion she was beginning to recognize. "How so? You present yourself as this straightforward rancher, but there's so much more beneath the surface." She turned to face him fully. "Why did you never marry before now?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. "Never found the right woman, I suppose, or perhaps never believed I deserved one." "Because of your father," Daisy guessed softly. Hunter nodded, his gaze shifting to the storm-lashed landscape. "I spent years afraid I carried his violence in my blood. It seemed safer to keep to myself." "And now?" Daisy asked, her heart beating faster. His eyes returned to hers, intense and honest. "Now I know better. A man chooses what kind of man he'll be, every day with every decision." The truth of his words resonated deeply within her. Without conscious thought, Daisy raised her hand to his cheek. Hunter went very still, his breath catching. "Daisy," he whispered, her name both a question and a prayer. She answered by rising on her toes and pressing her lips to his, a kiss as gentle as the rain now falling steadily beyond the porch. Hunter remained frozen for a heartbeat before his arms encircled her, drawing her closer as he returned the kiss with a tenderness that made her heart ache. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Hunter rested his forehead against hers. "I didn't expect this," he admitted. "When I made that offer in Pine Creek, I never imagined." "Neither did I," Daisy confessed, "but I'm glad for it, whatever comes next." They stood together watching the storm until the rain began to subside, replaced by a gentle mist that shrouded the valley in mystery. When they finally went inside, something fundamental had shifted between them, a barrier crossed, a new understanding reached. That night, Daisy hesitated outside her bedroom door, torn between the pull of her growing feelings and the caution of her rational mind. Hunter paused at his own door, his expression a mirror of her conflict. "Good night, Daisy," he said finally, his voice husky. "Good night, Hunter," she replied, entering her room alone but carrying the warmth of their kiss with her into sleep. September brought cooler temperatures and the changing colors of autumn to the valley. It also brought an unexpected visitor, Thomas Lockhart, arriving unannounced one afternoon while Hunter was checking cattle in the north pasture. Daisy was stunned to see her brother dismounting at the hitching post, looking more prosperous and sober than when she'd left him months before. "Thomas. What on earth are you doing here?" she exclaimed, wiping flour-covered hands on her apron as she stepped onto the porch. Thomas smiled sheepishly. "Hello, little sister. Thought it was time I checked on you, made sure this husband of yours is treating you right." Daisy's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "How did you find us, and why now, after all these months?" Thomas's smile faltered. "Can't a brother visit without an interrogation? You look well, Daisy. This life agrees with you." Before she could press further, Elijah appeared from the barn, shotgun casually but visibly in hand. "Everything all right, Mrs. Ingram?" "Yes, Elijah. This is my brother, Thomas Lockhart." Daisy turned back to Thomas. "Come inside. Hunter should be back soon." In the kitchen, Daisy poured coffee while studying her brother. He was better dressed than she'd ever seen him, sporting a new hat and boots. His face was clearer, suggesting he'd cut back on the drinking, but there was a nervous energy about him that set her on edge. "You still haven't explained how you found us, Thomas." Thomas fidgeted with his coffee cup. "Ran into an old acquaintance who mentioned seeing you. Said you'd married well, living on a fine spread north of Laramie." Daisy's stomach tightened. "What old acquaintance?" "Fellow named Blackwell." Thomas had the grace to look uncomfortable. "I know what you're thinking, but he seemed genuinely concerned about you." "Concerned?" Daisy's voice rose incredulously. "The man was going to force me to marry him to settle your gambling debts." Thomas held up his hands placatingly. I know, it was unforgivable. But he claims he's turned over a new leaf, said he just wants to make amends." "By sending you to spy on us." Daisy stood, anger burning away her initial pleasure at seeing her brother. "Tell me the truth, Thomas. What does Blackwell want?" Thomas's facade crumbled. "He wants a partnership with Ingram. Says this ranch sits on land that could be valuable beyond cattle, something about mining rights. He's got investors lined up, but needs Ingram's cooperation." "And what does he get out of it, Blackwell?" Came Hunter's voice from the doorway, his expression hard as he entered, having returned unnoticed during their conversation. Thomas started guiltily. "Mr. Ingram, I presume? I'm Thomas Lockhart, Daisy's brother, I gathered," Hunter replied coldly. "Answer the question." "What's Blackwell's angle?" Thomas swallowed visibly. 20% of all profits, plus recognition as the broker who put the deal together. It could mean a fortune for everyone involved. Hunter crossed to stand beside Daisy, his presence solid and reassuring. "And what do you get, Lockhart?" "For delivering this opportunity, enough to start fresh," Thomas admitted, "a small finder's fee." "And if we refuse?" Daisy asked quietly. Thomas looked genuinely confused. "Why would you? It's a chance at real wealth." "This ranch is already wealth," Hunter stated firmly. "It's a living, a home, a future. I won't gamble that on Blackwell's schemes." Thomas's expression hardened slightly. "He said you might be difficult. That's why he sent me first, thought you might be more receptive coming from family." "And if that failed?" Daisy pressed, suddenly certain there was more to the story. Thomas hesitated too long before answering. "He just wants a meeting to present his case personally." Hunter and Daisy exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. "Where is Blackwell now?" Hunter asked. "Laramie." "At the Grand Hotel." Thomas seemed relieved to provide this information. "He gave me 2 days to convince you to meet with him." Hunter's jaw tightened. "And if you fail?" Thomas looked down at his coffee. "He has some papers, gambling markers with my signature. Enough to see me in prison for fraud." "So once again, you've put yourself in Blackwell's power," Daisy said sadly. "And once again, you expect others to save you from the consequences." "I'm sorry, Daisy," Thomas said, genuine remorse in his voice. "I thought I was finally on the right path. Blackwell offered me a job, seemed to believe in me. By the time I realized what he really wanted, I was already in too deep." Hunter studied Thomas thoughtfully. "You have a choice now, Lockhart. Ride back to Blackwell and tell him we're not interested. Take whatever punishment comes. Or stay here, help us deal with him once and for all, and maybe earn back some of your sister's respect." Thomas looked between them, indecision clear on his face. "What do you mean, deal with him?" "Blackwell won't stop," Hunter explained. "Men like him never do. But if he wants to meet, we'll meet on our terms, not his." Daisy touched Hunter's arm. "Are you sure that's wise? Blackwell is dangerous. So am I when my family is threatened." The words were simple but spoken with such quiet certainty that even Thomas looked impressed. "Family." Thomas repeated, glancing between them. "So this isn't just some business arrangement anymore." Daisy met Hunter's gaze, drawing strength from the warmth she found there. "No, Thomas, it's not just business." That evening, after Thomas had been settled in the spare room, Hunter and Daisy sat before the fire, planning their approach to Blackwell. "I don't trust Thomas to keep our confidence," Daisy admitted. "Not if Blackwell applies enough pressure." Hunter nodded. "I agree. Which is why we'll only tell him what we want Blackwell to know." A trap, Daisy realized, of sorts. Hunter took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "I've sent Elijah to gather some friends' men I trust with my life. By the time Blackwell arrives, we'll be ready." Daisy studied their joined hands. "I've brought nothing but trouble to your door." Hunter lifted her chin gently. "You've brought life to this house, Daisy. Light and warmth I didn't know was missing until you showed me." His voice deepened. "I'd face 100 Blackwells to keep you safe." The raw honesty in his words melted something within her. "Hunter," she whispered, leaning toward him. Their kiss was different from the one they'd shared during the storm, deeper, more certain, filled with the understanding of what they now meant to each other. When they parted, both breathless, Hunter cupped her face in his hands. "When this is over," he promised, "we'll talk about that year I promised you, see if perhaps we might negotiate new terms." Daisy smiled, her heart full. "I'd like that very much." The next morning, Thomas was sent back to Laramie with a message. Hunter would meet with Blackwell in 3 days' time at the ranch to discuss potential business opportunities. The invitation was carefully worded to suggest interest without commitment. The intervening days were a flurry of preparation. Elijah returned with 4 men former Army comrades of Hunter's, now ranchers and lawmen in their own right. The sheriff from the nearest town, a taciturn man named Gideon Wells, also arrived, having been briefed on Blackwell's history of fraud and intimidation. "We'll keep things legal," Sheriff Wells assured them, "but it's high time someone put Blackwell in his place." The plan was simple but effective. Blackwell would be allowed to present his proposal, giving him enough rope to hang himself with his own words. The sheriff and Hunter's friends would be concealed throughout the property, witnesses to whatever threats or schemes Blackwell might reveal. The appointed day dawned clear and cool, the mountains rimmed with early frost. Daisy dressed with particular care in a blue dress that Hunter once mentioned brought out the color of her eyes. As she pinned up her hair, she caught sight of her reflection and barely recognized the confident woman who looked back at her. 6 months at the Double Arrow had changed her in ways she hadn't fully appreciated until now. Hunter found her in the kitchen, preparing coffee for their unwelcome visitors. "You look beautiful," he said, his eyes warm with admiration. "And you look worried," she countered, straightening his collar. "Will this work?" "It will." He captured her hands in his. "But no matter what happens today, remember that you're safe here. This is your home for as long as you want it to be." The sound of approaching horses interrupted them. Through the window, they could see Blackwell riding up the lane, Thomas and 2 unfamiliar men flanking him. Daisy took a deep breath, steeling herself for the confrontation. "Together?" Hunter asked, offering his arm. "Together," she agreed, placing her hand in the crook of his elbow. They stepped onto the porch as the riders dismounted. Blackwell looked much as Daisy remembered, expensively dressed, with a predatory smile that never reached his eyes. His gaze swept over her possessively before turning to Hunter. "Ingram," he greeted, his tone falsely cordial. "Appreciate you agreeing to this meeting. I think you'll find my proposition most advantageous." "We'll see," Hunter replied neutrally. "Come inside. My wife has prepared refreshments." Blackwell's eyes narrowed slightly at the emphasis on wife, but he followed them into the house, his men remaining outside at Hunter's insistence. Thomas trailed behind, avoiding Daisy's gaze. In the main room, Blackwell took the offered seat at the table, accepting coffee from Daisy with a smile that made her skin crawl. "You're looking well, my dear. Ranch life clearly agrees with you." "It does," Daisy replied evenly, taking her place beside Hunter. "I've found my true home here." Blackwell's smile tightened. "How fortunate. Now to business." He withdrew papers from his coat, spreading them on the table. "Your land sits atop what geologists believe to be a significant copper deposit. With the right investment, we could establish a mining operation that would make cattle ranching look like penny gathering." Hunter examined the documents with apparent interest. "And your role would be facilitator." "I have connections to Eastern investors eager to develop Western resources. For a modest percentage, I'll handle all negotiations, permits, and arrangements." Blackwell leaned forward. "You'd retain ownership of the surface land, of course. Continue ranching if you wish, while wealth literally flows from beneath your feet." "Sounds too good to be true," Hunter observed. "The best opportunities often do," Blackwell replied smoothly. "I've similar arrangements with ranchers throughout the territory. Ask young Lockhart here, he's been assisting me in identifying suitable properties." Thomas shifted uncomfortably in his chair but said nothing. Hunter leaned back, studying Blackwell thoughtfully. "And if I'm not interested?" Blackwell's expression hardened fractionally. "That would be most unfortunate. These investors are not accustomed to rejection. They tend to find ways to acquire what they want, one way or another." "Is that a threat, Mr. Blackwell?" Daisy asked, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Merely an observation, my dear." Blackwell's attention shifted back to Hunter. "Consider your position carefully, Ingram. You're isolated out here. Accidents happen on the frontier, fires, rustling, unexpected visits from unsavory characters." Hunter's expression remained impassive. "I'm familiar with frontier dangers. Prepared for them too." "Everyone believes that," Blackwell said dismissively. "Until tragedy strikes." He glanced at Daisy. "Would be a shame if anything happened to your lovely wife. Pine Creek is full of cautionary tales about vulnerable women left alone." The threat, thinly veiled as it was, hung in the air. Hunter's hand moved to cover Daisy's on the table, a gesture of reassurance and protection both. "I believe I've heard enough," Hunter said quietly. Blackwell misinterpreted his tone as capitulation. "Excellent. I have the preliminary agreements here. Just your signature, not for an agreement," Hunter interrupted, rising to his feet. "For your arrest, Blackwell." The door to the kitchen opened and Sheriff Wells stepped through, badge gleaming on his chest. Simultaneously, the front door swung wide, revealing Hunter's friends, all armed and serious, Blackwell's face contorted with rage. "What is the meaning of this? Vernon Blackwell, you're under arrest for attempted extortion and issuing criminal threats," Sheriff Wells announced. "We have witnesses to your statements here today, as well as sworn affidavits regarding your previous schemes." "This is absurd," Blackwell sputtered, half rising before one of Hunter's friends firmly pressed him back into his chair. "Lockhart, tell them, this was a legitimate business proposal." All eyes turned to Thomas, who stood trembling with indecision. He looked at Daisy, then at Blackwell, visibly torn between fear and something that might have been the stirrings of conscience. "Mr. Blackwell threatened to burn down the ranch if Ingram didn't cooperate," Thomas said finally, his voice gaining strength as he continued. "He also implied harm to my sister. There was nothing legitimate about his intentions." Blackwell's face purpled with fury. "You ungrateful whelp. After everything I've done for you, you've done nothing but use him, just as you tried to use me," Daisy interjected, rising to stand beside Hunter. "But that ends today." As Sheriff Wells read out the formal charges, Blackwell's bluster gave way to calculating silence. His gaze, when it settled on Hunter and Daisy, promised retribution. "This isn't over," he warned as he was led away. "I have friends in high places. You'll regret this day." "The only regret I have," Hunter replied evenly, "is not stopping you sooner." After Blackwell and his men had been taken away, bound for the jail in Laramie, an awkward silence fell. Thomas remained, uncertain of his welcome now that his role was fulfilled. "What happens to me?" he asked finally. Hunter looked to Daisy, leaving the decision to her. She studied her brother, the only family she had left, flawed though he was. "That depends on you, Thomas," she said gently. "Are you ready to start making better choices?" Thomas nodded, humility in his expression. "I want to, I'm just not sure I know how anymore." Hunter surprised them both by stepping forward. "There's always work for an honest man on a ranch. If you're willing to earn your keep, you can stay on through the winter. Learn some skills beyond gambling." Hope flickered in Thomas's eyes. "You do that, after everything." "For Daisy's sake," Hunter clarified, "and maybe for yours, if you prove worth the chance." It was dark by the time the excitement had fully subsided. Thomas had been shown to quarters in the bunkhouse, Elijah keeping a watchful eye on their newest ranch hand. Hunter's friends departed with promises to return if needed, and the house fell quiet once more. Daisy found Hunter on the porch, gazing at the stars emerging in the deepening twilight. She slipped her hand into his, and he drew her close against the evening chill. "Thank you," she said softly. "For giving Thomas a chance." Hunter's arm tightened around her. "Everyone deserves a chance to be better than they've been." He turned to face her fully. "Including me. You've nothing to prove, Hunter," Daisy assured him. "You're already the best man I know." His eyes searched hers, vulnerability mingling with hope. "Good enough to ask you to stay, not for a year but for always." Daisy's heart swelled. "Are you asking me to be your wife in truth, not just in name?" "I'm asking you to be my partner in everything," Hunter said, taking both her hands in his. "I love you, Daisy. I think I have since that first day in Pine Creek when you stood tall despite your fear." Tears of joy blurred her vision. "I love you too, and yes, I'll stay for always." Their kiss sealed the promise, deep and sweet beneath the canopy of stars. When they finally parted, Hunter rested his forehead against hers. "I never expected this," he whispered. "When I paid that debt, I thought I was offering you freedom. I never imagined you'd give me the same gift in return." Daisy smiled, understanding perfectly. Sometimes the most precious things come from the most unexpected beginnings. Hand in hand, they returned to the warmth of their home, no longer a house of convenience, but a true haven built on growing love. The year that had once seemed like a sentence to be served now stretched before them, filled with promise. Each day, an opportunity to deepen the bond neither had anticipated, but both now cherished above all else. Winter arrived early that year, blanketing the double arrow in pristine white. The ranch settled into the slower rhythm of the cold months, mending equipment, tending to the reduced herd kept close to the barn, preparing for spring's inevitable rebirth. Thomas, to everyone's surprise, proved a willing worker. Under Elijah's gruff tutelage, he learned to repair fences, care for livestock, and handle the countless tasks that ranch life demanded. The physical labor seemed to steady him, and though the craving for cards and whiskey sometimes shadowed his eyes, he fought it with a determination Daisy had never seen in him before. As Christmas approached, Daisy transformed the house with pine boughs and ribbons, determined to make their first holiday together memorable. Hunter watched her preparations with amused indulgence, secretly planning his own surprise. On Christmas Eve, after a festive dinner with Thomas and Elijah as guests, Hunter presented Daisy with a small package wrapped in brown paper. "Merry Christmas," he said, an uncharacteristic nervousness in his manner. Daisy unwrapped it carefully to reveal a velvet box. Inside nestled a gold ring set with a small but perfect diamond, flanked by tiny sapphires. "It was my mother's," Hunter explained softly. "The only thing of hers I managed to keep. I had it sized for you in Laramie last month." Tears welled in Daisy's eyes as she understood the significance of the gift. "Hunter, are you sure? This is your most precious possession." "You're my most precious possession," he corrected gently. "And I want you to have a proper ring for our proper marriage." Proper marriage. Thomas echoed, looking between them in confusion. Hunter smiled, not taking his eyes from Daisy's face. "We're renewing our vows come spring, doing things right this time with friends and family present." "And a real wedding night after," Daisy added boldly, making Thomas choke on his cider while Elijah chuckled. Later, when they were alone, Hunter slipped the ring onto Daisy's finger. "I want to do everything right for you," he murmured, kissing her hand. "Give you the wedding you deserve." Daisy leaned into him, her heart full. "I already have everything I need, but I won't say no to a proper celebration." The warmth in Hunter's eyes made promises that carried them through the long winter nights, building anticipation for the spring to come. March brought the first signs of thawing, tiny green shoots appearing in Daisy's garden, and newborn calves wobbling alongside their mothers in the home pasture. It also brought news from Vernon Blackwell had been convicted of multiple counts of fraud and attempted extortion, sentenced to 5 years in the territorial prison. "We're truly free of him now," Daisy said, relief evident in her voice as Hunter shared the telegram from Sheriff Wells. Hunter nodded, drawing her close. "Just in time for our new beginning." Their wedding celebration took place on the first truly warm day of May. Martha from the trading post had helped Daisy create a simple but beautiful white dress. Frank brought a real minister from Laramie. Neighbors from surrounding ranches gathered in the yard of the Double Arrow, which had been transformed with wildflowers and ribbons for the occasion. Thomas, sober and respectful in a new suit, stood proudly as Daisy's only family. Elijah served as Hunter's best man, polished up so thoroughly he was almost unrecognizable. When Daisy walked toward Hunter, her face glowing with happiness beneath a crown of spring blossoms, he felt his heart might burst. This was no arrangement of convenience, no business transaction or reluctant compromise. This was love, freely given and joyfully received. They spoke their vows beneath an arch Hunter had built with his own hands, promising to love, honor, and cherish one another for all their days. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife again, but now in truth Hunter pulled Daisy into a kiss that left no doubt about the depth of his feelings. The celebration lasted well into the night, with music and dancing, food and laughter. As the moon rose over the mountains, Hunter led Daisy away from the festivities toward the house their home, now filled with memories both challenging and beautiful. In the privacy of what was now truly their bedroom, Hunter took Daisy's face between his hands. "I love you, Mrs. Ingram." "More than I ever thought possible." Daisy smiled up at him, her heart overflowing. "And I love you, Mr. Ingram, my rescuer, my partner, my forever." Their kiss deepened, passion no longer held in check by propriety or uncertainty. As clothing gave way to tender exploration, Daisy marveled at how far they had come from that desperate day in Pine Creek, from strangers bound by a business arrangement to true partners in life and love. Later, nestled in Hunter's arms as moonlight spilled through the window, Daisy traced the contours of his face with gentle fingers. "Do you ever regret it, paying my brother's debt that day?" Hunter captured her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "Not for a single moment." "Best investment I ever made, even with all the trouble it brought," she persisted. "Especially with all the trouble," he assured her. "It brought you to me, Daisy. Everything else is just details." As they drifted towards sleep, wrapped in each other's warmth, Daisy reflected on the strange and wonderful journey that had brought them to this moment. A desperate arrangement had blossomed into profound love. A marriage of convenience had become the most inconvenient, challenging, and ultimately rewarding relationship imaginable. And a cowboy who had paid a stranger's debt had found, in that impulsive act of decency, the beginning of his own redemption and a love that would last forever.